So once again, we have this gold standard prophet that's merely playing his role in this new Hegelian dialectic of the dollar versus gold, two false choices of a monopoly currency controlled by the same criminal elite. While I think it's important that you listen to all and follow none, at the end of the day, you must use your logic to best position yourself, not only for your financial survival, but for something that resonates with you. I believe in competition and currency is a way out of this mess. I believe that free market commodity currencies are the wave of the future, so long as that there's no fixed relationship between the currencies and that people can use whatever they want to value their wealth in. The next gold advocate I was going to take on was Jim Sinclair. Jim Sinclair is on fire in the silver community. It's like every other article is some blurb about him. Silver Doctors is all over him. Every time I go anywhere, Jim Sinclair said this, Jim Sinclair said that. He had this big conference in New York. I think he got like 2,000 people to show up for this thing, and it's like this guy can do no wrong. And Jim is known as Mr. Gold. He's widely published and followed in the precious metals community, and I've never really paid too much attention to him because he never really talks about silver. And recently gave this cryptic comment about silver that really raised my attention to him and what he's really moving towards. On October 5th, his comment concerning silver was thus: gold will protect you in this transition. Silver will give you a cheap thrill followed by a spiritual existence devoid of a teacher. When pressed to clarify his statement, he seemed to deride silver. He responded to silver's final price after its meteoric rise depends on the economic conditions at the end of the game. Silver has industrial purposes as well as precious. He goes on to say that silver is more hated than gold by the banksters, and making it thus the most hated of all precious metals. And he goes on to conclude that I must admit that silver aficionados are even more uptight than gold files in the gold's price action. So I think his comment makes sense if he knows that the dollar versus gold Hegelian dialectic is merely a ploy to continue the criminal elite's power in a post-paradigm world. He says that silver will have a meteoric rise, but who will be in control of the next paradigm will determine what the ultimate perceived value of silver is. If the current criminal elite run the table once more and make a gold-backed digital currency and remonetize it, driving much of the demand towards gold relative to silver, he states that silver is the most hated of all precious metals, and after seeing the reasons why they hate it, because it challenges the gold standard that they want, and that's why they hate it. The criminal elite have had a war on silver for hundreds of years since the crime of 1873, where they demonetized silver, and as presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan famously proclaimed, they crucified mankind on a cross of gold by forcing them to repay debts in gold and forcing the depreciation of silver since it no longer had any monetary demand. The banksters then drained the availability of gold, limiting the monetary supply of gold, making it nearly impossible to pay back debts, and the banks foreclosed on all the properties. In fact, in The Wizard of Oz, it was actually a monetary allegory about the crime of 1873, and that the solution was always with Dorothy with her silver slippers. But the criminal elite also went on to famously have another war on silver, with not one but two opium wars against China that drained almost all the silver out of China that England had lost through their large trade deficits because the British loved their tea, China, and silk. The British tried to negotiate with Chinese emperor but were dismissed. The British then set about to get their silver back by China by importing opium by the Thuggee in India through the most evil company of all time, the British East Indian Company. This drug trade drained China of all their silver, which at one point was estimated to have 25% of all the silver in the world, even though that China had no natural production of it. Just through all the trade of the world, they had so much of it. But China lost all their trade through these illicit drug trades and the two opium wars. And when the Chinese sought to control the illicit drug trade through their own sovereign power, the British ended up seizing the Chinese ports and forced settlement upon them to allow them to continue. This actually happened twice, and China was raped by the same Rothschild banks that funded the British Empire. In fact, the drug trade still is on the rise because HSBC, which was created out of the opium wars, are still laundering drug money today. The criminal elite also continued their attack on silver when they demonetized silver in India, and also when JFK signed Executive Order 1110 to establish a debt-free silver-backed currency soon after Kennedy was assassinated and silver was demonetized again out of U.S. coinage in 1964. So while I would agree with Jim Sinclair that the bankers do hate silver and love gold, that does not mean that I would participate in the next scheme to dominate humanity. I was offered only a few minutes to speak at last year's Silver Summit, and when I talked to silver investors, I talked to them about thinking about the consciousness of why they were investing in silver. I view silver as the Achilles heel of the debt and death paradigm and would seek to challenge their plans for a new monopoly currency with silver. I believe that the bankers' war on silver that has been going on for centuries has destroyed the stockpiles of silver and will actually become more rare than gold. I would not want silver standard, but competing currencies and a free market to decide the value therein. I'm not even for a fixed bimetallic standard. That wouldn't do it for me. So then Jim Sinclair had this gold rah-rah meeting in New York a few weeks ago, which thousands of precious metals investors flocked to hear Jim once again. He said he saw a triple-digit future for silver, but that silver's rise will be orgasmic, a rapid climax followed by a rapid decline. How can he be so sure about this? Well, maybe if we look into his background, we can see why he's pushing for a gold standard. Back when Jim started blogging, I found an article that he wrote on Gada's website that sent chills down my spine. And I read, quote, this is from Jim Sinclair, I think in 2004, that says, "I have no worries about gold right now because I know how things end in the market even before they begin. I am the son of one of the world's greatest traders, Bertram Seligman, who, like Jesse Livermore, always knew what was over the horizon. I do not pretend to have all the talent of those market giants, but just some of it. Goldman Sachs, Salomon Brothers, Lehman Brothers, and Bache are a few of the firms that my family started. All of this appears in a book called Our Crowd, which I just finished reading. Although Bertram Seligman was my father, James Sinclair, from my mother's name, has been my name since birth. If it had been possible, I would have changed my surname back to my father's name prior to entering my career. The knowledge of Wall Street runs in my blood, my heart, and my soul." Then in another interview on August 16, 2003, he stated, "I am trained to be a survivor in a battle that takes no prisoners. You may not be. I live the markets day and night. I am from the same lineage of Jesse Seligman, the famous banking family." Now you're going to love this. The gold cartel of common interest is largely comprised of Seligman firms. Yes, my ancestors founded them all except for Merrill. Goldman and Lehman are my families. Many of you will make fun of me when I first told you those cartel members had met their match. Well, they have. They've met the bloodline of their founder, and they did not know it until now. So here's this guy that goes back to the founding of Goldman Sachs, Salomon Brothers, Lehman Brothers, and Bache. Wall Street lives in his blood, and his father's name is not Sinclair, but Seligman. So I read this book called Our Crowd, Great Jewish Families of New York City by Stephen Birmingham, that relates the details of powerful New York banking alliance in which the House of Seligman ancestors, Jim Sinclair and his father, Bertram Seligman, became partners with the House of Rothschild and the House of Morgan. Those three houses dominated the New York banking scene back then. So I'll read you a couple quotes from it. In the autumn of 1874, Baron Rothschild summoned Isaac Seligman, who is the patriarch of this family, to his office to give him a piece of news. $55 million worth of United States bonds were being offered for sale, and Baron Rothschild suggested that the issue might be backed by a combination of the three houses, House of Rothschild, House of Morgan, and House of Seligman. For a time, August Belmont would act as the agent for both the Rothschilds and J.W. Seligman. The Seligmans were now participating with one of the most powerful financial combinations in the history of banking. The Seligmans didn't get on the same level as the Rothschilds. They got a smaller portion of this offering, but at least they were considering themselves Rothschild peers. Seligman, Belmont, and Morgan, Rothschild Alliance, were so successful by the end of the decade there were complaints on Wall Street that London and German-based bankers, i.e. the Rothschild bankers, had a monopoly on the sale of United States bonds in Europe, and they did. The Seligmans were now called, quote, the American Rothschilds. So that's on page 138, 139 of Our Crowd. The family of Bertram Seligman also started Bache Group, the group that loaned William Hunt and his brother Nelson Bunker Hunt the money after they declared bankruptcy in 1981, having reportedly lost billions of dollars trying to corner the silver market. And Jim Sinclair had advised the Hunt brothers from there. So from 1981 to 1984, Jim Sinclair served as a precious metal advisor to Hunt Oil and the Hunt family for the liquidation of the silver position as a prerequisite for a $1 billion loan arranged by the Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker. So here's Jim Sinclair. His lineage goes back to the Seligmans, who are on par with the Rothschilds, part of this family, part of this system, pushing for gold, helped the Hunts, liquidated all this silver. Jim Sinclair is a perfect example of why I say listen to all and follow none.
And while so many people are really focused on, the manipulation, the price of, all this forces stacked against us, the thing that we all have to remember is that we empower them, okay? We need to divert our focus back to us. So when I put together the Silver Bullet, Silver Shield coin, I put in the saying, a conscious solution to collectivist problems. I'm a firm believer that every answer to any problem out there has to come from the opposite consciousness. And I want to implore all of you to start thinking, because I do believe that we're all going to be very successful in this next paradigm, transferring our wealth to the next paradigm. How are you actively, consciously going to be different in the next paradigm? Because I feel far too often, not silver investors, but let's say some gold investors, I really get the feeling they're just setting themselves up to be the next financial oligarchs. And I think that we have the power within ourselves to really put a different conscious solution out there. And I challenge all of you to stop thinking in terms of dollars and start thinking about how you can be a blessing in the next paradigm when the world is going to need our solution.